All right. Well, welcome everyone to a Herzog Law Firm webinar on estate planning in prime time. My name is Dave Kubikian. I'm one of the attorneys here at the Herzog Law Firm. We have four of us that specialize in estate planning and elder law, but we do other areas of law as well, other attorneys that specialize in real estate and litigation and so on. We have offices, as you see, in Albany, Clifton Park, Saratoga Springs, and down in Kingston. And we basically serve the entire map of New York because we are New York attorneys following New York law. As I mentioned, today's topic is estate planning in prime time. And it's a fun webinar. I enjoy it. It's a little different than the other ones in that we'll start to use some TV families to give us some lessons on how wills work and what happens if we don't have a will and why it's so important to prepare. Okay. So going through the slides here, people always ask me, do I need a will? Do I need a power of attorney? Do I need a trust, etc.? And I say to people, look, what I do, even though I'm an estate planning elder law attorney, I really deal with car washes. And people always give me this look like, what? I deal with car washes, and you all have been to the car wash. Estate planning, elder law, it's like a car wash. No matter what package you pick at the car wash, and there are basic, right, then waxes and really super duper deluxe car washes out there when you go to the car wash, different price points, different bells and whistles. No matter what car wash you pick at the car wash, guess what? Your car got washed, right? Even the most basic car wash washes your car. And it's a good analogy for what we do because the car wash with estate planning is who gets your money, when do they get it, how do they get it? That's the car wash. You tell me everything goes to my kids. No, everything does not go to my kids. I want to leave things to my grandkids. My kids are just fine, but I don't want my grandkids to get it at age 10. I want them to get it at 25. Great. That's your car wash, right? Whether you go with a basic estate plan, whether you go with a revocable trust, which we'll talk about, whether you go with a Medicaid asset protection trust, which we'll also talk about. The end result of those things will still be that your money goes based on your instructions, that basic thing. All right, well then if it's all the same, if it's all a car wash, why am I going to get really complicated? Why am I going to go with something easy? What's the difference? Well, just like a real car wash, right? There might be more protection to your car that comes with a super duper deluxe car wash. There may be less protections with the regular outside only, exterior only car wash. And it's kind of like that here. But make no mistake, we are pro plan, whatever the plan is, a basic plan, a super involved plan. The basic plan when it comes to estate planning, the exterior only of the car washes, if you will, is having a power of attorney, a healthcare proxy, living will, as well as something called last will and testament. Now, in my opinion, everyone 18 years or older, every adult out there should have this basic estate plan. And it's not because you're going to die at 18, right? It's highly, highly, highly unlikely you're going to die at 58, let alone 18. But it's because bad things happen and we don't know who it's going to happen to and when it's going to happen. In terms of the basics, 2 of the basic estate planning documents don't even deal with your death, right? The power of attorney, healthcare proxy, living will, those are for during your life. The idea is we're naming people as agents to do things for us if we're unable to sign or speak for ourselves, if we've lost our mental capacity temporarily or permanently. Powers of attorney are for non-healthcare decision making. Again, if we're out of town or we're out of commission, right? We've lost our cognitive abilities. At least we have someone who can do things for us. Now, a lot of people think, well, that's great, but I'm married, my wife can sign for me, my husband can sign for me. No, they can't. They can sign on a checkbook for a joint bank account because they're on the account, but they can't sign for you. Nobody can sign for you unless you are holding a power of attorney where you name them as your agent, or if you didn't have a power of attorney, if we went through something called a guardianship proceeding, which a power of attorney is essentially trying to avoid. Okay? Power of attorney, the forms changed, over the last 15 years or so. It went from very basic to very complicated, and the governor just signed legislation that will make it a little easier again, and we'll be sharing that once we know the final form. But we expect people to be updating their powers of attorney this year. In terms of healthcare proxies and living wills, it's about healthcare decisions with the healthcare proxy. Seems pretty self-explanatory. With living wills, it's the end of healthcare, end of life decision making, very personal to all of us. Really important to have these documents in place, again, not because awful things are going to happen tomorrow, but because they might. Lastly, there's a last will and testament, and that's one of the most misconstrued documents that we deal with. When it comes to a will, people, I ask at seminars all the time, true or false, a will says how all your assets are going to go? The answer is no. It does not say how all your assets are going to pass. It does say how some of your assets will pass, how certain property will be distributed at your death. We'll talk about why it's only some of your property and what's good about that, what's bad about that over the next several slides. Your will names someone called an executor, and that executor has the power, once they are appointed by the courts, to do whatever it is your will said. If your will said give everything to St. Jude's Hospital, well, then the executor is expected to be giving everything to St. Jude's Hospital, subject to administration expenses. If it says hold things in trust for my grandkids, well, then there you go. A will is not like any other document. A lot of times, especially during COVID, you can e-sign things, or you could apply for a mortgage and initial online. You can fill out all sorts of forms online. A will is not one of them because there are strict requirements for how a will gets signed. We need 2 disinterested witnesses. We need to make sure we sign at the end. There's no handwritten changes. We got to make sure we had our mental capacity when it was signed, theoretically, and ideally, an attorney is, and I'm not saying this because I'm an attorney, but an attorney would supervise the signing of the will, as well as maybe the preparing of the will, all to ensure that things were done the right way, as well as to give the courts the presumption that things were done the right way because an attorney was involved. Now, a will doesn't deal with all of your property because we all have things out there called non-probate property. Well, so what's probate property, right? Probate, the word probate, right? Oftentimes we say we're going to probate a will. We don't have to probate a will. We do have to probate a will. What probate is the proving of the will. Okay, probate means to prove. It's the proving of the will. Your will, it might be a piece of paper, means nothing, okay, until you die and someone takes that will and goes through probate, okay? Not all of the assets you own are governed by the will, thus they don't all have to go through probate. And a little secret, guys, I don't want you to go through probate unnecessarily. The key word there is unnecessarily because it might be very much necessary to probate a will. But the reason why your will doesn't govern all your assets is because you have a lot of assets which, by operation of law, automatically avoid probate. There's a good thing that comes with that and a bad thing that comes with that. Examples of non-probate property: life insurance. I have life insurance. My wife is my beneficiary. If I did a will today that said I give you guys everything and then I died tomorrow, unfortunately, you do not get my life insurance, even though my will said you get everything, right? Everything doesn't include my life insurance because my wife is beneficiary. The beneficiary of my life insurance controls. You have lots of assets with beneficiaries, guys. We have retirement accounts, 401ks, IRAs, where you have the option of naming beneficiaries. You can have bank accounts, CDs, savings bonds, where you can designate people to be receiving that transfer on death, pay on death, TOD. We have assets that are titled jointly. If we have a house with our wife or with our husband, right, it's titled jointly with rights of survivorship, or at least it's assumed it's that way. So upon the death of one spouse, the house automatically belongs to our spouse. So it's important to realize what's not governed by your will and what is governed by your will. And again, it's not all good news here, because I'm going to tell you, I really want you to avoid probate. But a lot of times it's very necessary to go through probate. We'll talk more about that in a second. But what happens if we don't have a will and we pass away? It's called dying intestate. No, New York State won't get all your money. The government isn't going to get your money. It doesn't work that way. It's possible it results in that happening, but instead it's far more likely that the wrong things happen, but it goes to family members. In fact, there's a law in New York that says exactly where all of your money goes if you don't have a will. Now, the problem with that statute is that it doesn't talk about what happens if that person it's supposed to go to isn't doing very well. What happens if that person has one leg in a nursing home, right? What are we going to do then? It doesn't matter. The statute is blind, and it just goes off your family tree. And what we see, unfortunately, a lot of times when people don't have wills, is that it results in money going to the wrong people. Okay. So the way it works in general, before we get to Archie and Edith, is that if we die in New York without a will, we look at the family tree. If I'm married and don't have any children, everything goes to my spouse. If I'm not married at my death and I have children, grown children, young children, whatever, it goes all to them, all to the children. If I don't have kids, I don't have a spouse, where does everything go? It goes up to mom and dad, if they're around. Mom and dad aren't around, where does it go? To my brothers and sisters. So brothers and sisters, we go down to nephews and nieces. None of that, potentially great nephews and nieces, up to grandparents, maternal, paternal, and then down to uncles and aunts, cousins, on and on. So it is possible it can go to the government, but only if we have a very barren family tree. More likely it goes to the wrong people. Now there's one example I did not talk to you about. What happens if I die married with kids? And that's an example we'll talk about with the bunkers here. So we all know All in the Family. I hope we do. Carol O'Connor plays Archie Bunker, married to the lovely Edith Bunker, played by Jean Stapleton. Their daughter is Sally Struthers, right? Plays Gloria, and she's married to Michael. It's the basic outline of the show. This is what the family tree looks like. If Archie passed away and he did not have a will, the assets that are in his estate, they would go as follows. 50,000 plus 1/2 would pass to Edith. The other 1/2 would go to Gloria. That's what New York law says. Is that awful? I guess not, right? It goes to my spouse and my kid. That's not the worst thing in the world. But let me ask you guys, and feel free to unmute yourself for this. It is interactive. How old do you think Archie and Edith Bunker are in the show? I'll give you guys a couple seconds here, and then I'll answer it for you if you haven't yelled out. So feel free to yell something out. I'll give you a second.
I'm guessing they're in their late 50s.
Late 50s.
Or so. Maybe 60?
Maybe 60. I like the first guess more.
Maybe, or is that pushing it?
Well, so
at 50s, somewhere in their 50s. Okay.
So as long as we assume that Wikipedia is correct and the internet is always right, they're in their early 50s in the show. And
early.
Yeah, and when I saw it, I said, gee, that's crazy. I mean, look at them. Look at their clothes, for crying out loud. But sure enough, I looked it up. They're in their early 50s, right? They had Gloria at a relatively young age, but normal back then. And yeah, she's probably in her late 20s in the show. Makes about sense. The problem is 50 ain't what it used to be, right? The way their lives were in their 50s is different than our lives will be in our 50s or have been in our 50s. And what that translates to is that Edith has a lot of life left. I don't want her to have half the money during that length of time. I want her to have all the money during that time, right? Why is her daughter getting half the money? All right, well, Gloria says, Mom, don't worry about it. Whenever you need money, my money's your money. Sure. That may work. I'd prefer for Edith to have all the money. Because here's the deal. If Gloria gets half the money, well, bad things happen to daughters too. What happens if she passes away? before mom does. Where does her money go? Well, if she doesn't have a will and she doesn't have kids, where does all her money go? Yeah, Meathead, right? All of the money that Gloria has would go to Meathead, and that obviously would not be a great result for Archie. So lesson here, real basic, guys. Have a will. I give everything to my spouse, everything. If my spouse predeceases, I give everything to Gloria. Under no circumstances do I want Meathead. Now, Meathead would be a part of it. He's not entitled to anything. He's by law, he's not blood. So everything to spouse, no spouse, everything to my issue, my kids. All right, let's move on to the next family. So here's a show I grew up with. It's called Growing Pains. It's one of my favorite awful sitcoms. It stars the Seavers. Alan Thicke, the late Alan Thicke, plays Dr. Jason Seaver. He's married to a TV reporter named Maggie Malone. He's got 3 kids, and later on in the show, he has 4 kids, because that's what they do to come up with storylines. They add kids to shows. It's a common theme around here. So what happens if Dr. Jason Seaver dies? And you know, as I mentioned, Alan Thicke did die, unfortunately, at a relatively young age. Well, if he dies without a will, same idea. 50,000 plus 1/2 goes to surviving spouse. The other half goes to the children. Okay, in the case of All in the Family, it was 1 kid. Here there's 4 kids, so if they're splitting a half, they each get 1/8, which equals 4/8, which equals 1/2. Great. Well, obviously, Maggie's a lot younger than Jean Stapleton, than Edith was in for the Bunkers. So she's got a lot more life left, obviously. Same concept. I want her to have all the money. When she is mom for little kids, when she's mom for people under 18, she is their guardian in terms of their legal responsible party, but she's not necessarily in charge of their money. She may need to do a limited guardianship proceeding in surrogate's court to be in charge of the money her kids inherit. And yeah, that adds some aggravation and some cost to things. It's probably not the end of the world. What I consider the end of the world, though, is not Carol or Ben or Chrissy getting money at 10 or 12 or 15 years old. It's the fact that these kids one day will turn 18. And when they turn 18, at least on paper, they're considered to be adults. I was 18 once. You were all 18 once. Some of us were very mature at 18. Some of us were not. And the last thing I would want is for my children to get money at 18 years old, because there's no rules for that if we die without a will. And there's nothing mom can do. It's the kid's money. And if you're 18 and you have a boatload of money, I don't know if you go to school. I don't know if you go to grad school. I don't know what comes of your life. So basics, basic will. I give everything to my spouse. If my spouse predeceases, I give everything to my children. Next paragraph, if any of my children are under the age of blank, I don't know, 25, 30, hold their share in trust as follows. Give them some at this age. Give them some more at that age. Give them everything else at 30. Pay for school. Give them a down payment for a house. Set up hurdles for them. Whatever you want. Basic will. Okay. Next family. Family ties. Everyone remembers the Keatons, right? So we have mom and dad, Stephen and Elsie, and they're raising, again, 3, later 4 kids, starring Michael J. Fox as Alex P. Keaton, and Justine Bateman is his sister, Mallory. And a little bit of everything we've talked about, right? We have minors, we have spouses, all those issues, but I took some liberties here. We all know that Michael J. Fox has Parkinson's. We also know Michael J. Fox has a lot of money. So he's not going to be worried about the needs associated with paying for things when it comes to having Parkinson's, but other people aren't so lucky. And the issue here is about special needs. And I know it's a little bit of a leap, but what happens if there's special needs in the family? One of our children, one of our grandkids has these needs. They're on SSD or SSI, and it's possible if they inherit money, they're going to lose those benefits, because some benefits are based on how much money you have. And if all of a sudden they inherit a lot of money outright, they may not qualify anymore. I once had a fact pattern similar to this, not mom and dad dying, but mom and dad having 4 kids. And they said in their plan they wanted everything to go to 3 of the 4 kids. And so I did what I do, which is I have to ask, why are we not leaving money for their other child? Is it because of an event that took place? Is it because there was a falling out? Because I need to document this in case someone contests the will down the road. And I asked, and then I'll change the name because it wasn't Alex, but I'll say, well, tell me about Alex. So why are we not leaving anything? What happened? Oh, nothing happened. We love Alex. In fact, Alex still lives with us. Alex, he's got this and that going on, and we don't want him to lose his benefits, so we're not going to leave him any money. And I always thought that was such a weird way to show your love and affection for someone, by disinheriting them, because that's what you're doing. And there are options where we're not saying they're going to lose their benefits, but we are leaving them something. So basic will. These are all basic wills. Everything to my spouse. My spouse predeceases everything to the kids. Not until ages this, and this. Great. Next paragraph. For Alex, anything that Alex is to receive under this will, hold it in trust as follows. We sprinkle in some language that says that Mallory is trustee for Alex's trust. She has discretion to give money at times for the benefit of Alex, pay for things like vacations and TVs and movies and what have you, when we're allowed to go on vacations and go to movies again, that is. And that way, there's money set aside to help him in his life. It's not money he can grab, so it's going to keep him still on the programs that he is qualified for, and we're not disinheriting someone we love. Even better, I really am a big fan of you setting up a special needs trust today that exists today for Alex. So that way other family members and grandparents and uncles and aunts and whoever, if they do want to leave things for Alex, I don't want everyone having separate trusts in their wills for Alex. I'd rather have them say, I give 10% to the Alex P. Keaton Special Needs Trust because it already exists. Okay, so there's special planning that happens when there's special needs. It complicates things, but only a little bit. And again, we want to make sure that everyone is represented in your plan and we're not disinheriting out of fear. Next, we have the Huxtables. There's only 2 more families and then we'll move on, I promise. I loved the show, first of all, because it was a great show and it made me laugh quite a bit. I love this family tree because it's got a little bit of everything, as you'll see. I don't love the fact that it stars Bill Cosby because it's Bill Cosby and we all know what's gone on with him. But let's focus on the estate planning angles, if you don't mind. We have the Huxtables, Heathcliff and Claire. One's a obstetrician and the other one is an attorney. They live in Brooklyn Heights. I went to Brooklyn Law. I used to live in Brooklyn Heights. You need buco bucks to live there, and they had a brownstone home, so good for them. They have 5 kids ranging from minors to adults. They have grandkids. Sandra had twins. Denise adopted Olivia. Adoption, great lesson. If a family member of yours adopts someone, they are like your blood relative. Okay, so Olivia is just as much the grandkid of Heathcliff as Claire, and Claire as Nelson and Winnie are. The lesson I want to focus on here, unfortunately, we plan not only for good things in life, we plan for bad things, including beneficiaries predeceasing us. And in my example here, I want to point out what happens if their daughter Denise or their daughter Sandra predeceased mom and dad. In that instance, because our basic will, and this extends to some of our other documents that we do, we say we leave everything to our issue, not to our kids. We say, I leave everything to my issue when it's appropriate, because issue means our kids. And then it means that if one of our kids predeceases us, we keep going down that branch or the family tree to see if there's any leaves below. So if Denise had Olivia or Sandra had her twins, something happened to Sandra, money will go to the grandkids the way we draft things, and it'll be subject to all the rules about ages and so on. If you don't have a will, this result is going to happen. Money will go to Olivia. Money will go to Nelson and Winnie. And the person who will likely be in charge of that money will be their father, Elvin or Lieutenant Martin. That's great if we love our son-in-laws. That's great if we love our daughter-in-laws. I have plenty of clients who don't feel that great about their in-laws. But the last thing they want is that no good son of a gun Elvin, who did produce children with my daughter, but did divorce her and break her heart. I don't want him in charge of my grandkids' money. I want Theo and Vanessa to be in charge of my grandkids' money. That only happens with having documents that say so. Okay. Lastly, guys, Full House, a show that deals with a single father, Danny Tanner, raising 3 little girls with the help of his brother-in-law, Uncle Jesse, and his friend, Uncle Joey. They're both uncles, but only one is a real uncle. What the heck is the lesson here? Well, you may not have children who are minors, but you may have children who are minors. And the biggest asset that your children have are those kids, your grandkids. They need to provide for those grandkids by having things like life insurance. They need to provide for those grandkids by having a will that says who's going to be their guardian. And while it's possible that their uncle, their blood uncle, Jesse, could be a guardian for them, it would be quite difficult for some friend of dad's to end up being the guardian, even though he was very instrumental in raising the kids. My point is, if you want to name your guardian, you do it in a will. It's guardians for your kids, just in case bad things happen to you and your spouse. Terribly important. Again, the most valuable asset we could think of. All right. Good. I convinced you you should have an estate plan. Whew. That's a relief. The next thing we want to do is we want to focus on avoiding probate. Okay. Your will, as I mentioned, is not a regular document. It does need witnesses. Those witnesses need to be disinterested. There are certain formalities that need to be followed. You need to declare the document to be your last will and testament, for crying out loud. If the will isn't done the right way, or it's not proven to have been executed the right way, the courts will proceed as if you don't have a will. As I mentioned, your will is a piece of paper. It has to go through probate for the words and the rules in your will to take effect. So you do a will, you do it with a good attorney. Where do we shift our focus? And now I'm going to go back to the car wash analogy for a moment. Excuse me. So the who gets what, that basic will that I was talking about, that's the basic car wash. From there, we know the car is going to get washed because we are at the car wash, right? It's all about the options. What bells and whistles? What's a good idea? What's a bad idea based on our fact pattern? And we want you to focus on avoiding probate, avoiding going through court, which is expensive and time consuming. We're essentially allowing anyone who has the right to contest the will an opportunity to contest the will, and sometimes they do contest the will. But more importantly, even when things are smooth sailing, right, if we go through probate, it still is going to take about a year. It's still going to cost several $1,000s beginning to end between court fees, attorney's fees, and so on. So we'd like to avoid that process if we can. We want to avoid probate. We want to accumulate our assets over our lives, because why not? I mean, that's just a bullet point. I have nothing to say about that. I'm not a financial advisor. But yeah, have more money. Why not? And then we want you to start to have an eye towards, well, what happens when I get older? I just saw my parents get older and they didn't, do so well, or we just spent a boatload of money with their long-term care needs. And that falls right into how do we preserve our wealth? What can we do now that'll help us down the road in a way that isn't too burdensome now? In terms of avoiding probate, there's a couple ways to do it, but we don't want to be foolish about it. When I die, if I die right now, I am going to die, but if I died right now, I think I mentioned to you, we probably don't need to look at my will. And the reason why is because I have so many assets that are automatically going to go to my wife. She happens to be the joint owner of real estate. She is a joint owner of bank accounts. She is my beneficiary on my life insurance. She's my beneficiary on my retirement, right? I am for her. So if something happened to me, snap of a finger, just about everything will go to her. no need to look at the will. Now, if my Starbucks, right, was poisoned this morning, well, then I will have a very large estate because we'll sue Starbucks and have some fun there, I guess. But that lawsuit will belong to my will, whether or not I was avoiding probate elsewhere. So it is important for me to have a will that says where things go. I can't accidentally leave a lot of money to my kids, right? I need to have a will that says everything to my spouse. Okay, but that means a will is a just in case document. It's not really the main way to move things. The fact that I already avoid probate with everything is what can lull people to sleep. When I do seminars, I say to people all the time that just the ages change. But right now, I have a 7-year-old daughter and a son who's 1 year and 3/4. And I'll tell people I have life insurance. My wife is my beneficiary. Who is my backup beneficiary on my life insurance? And you know what people say? They say, your kids. And I say, you're crazy. Like I just told you, they're 7 and, 20 months. That's not the right age for kids to get money. What happens if my wife and I get into a car accident, right? I have a lot of life insurance, right? That money will go to them at 1 year and 3/4 and 7 years old. Now, they will not have that money in their pocket. They're not going to put Toys R Us back in business. There will be someone in charge for them. But that money they got didn't have any rules tied to it. Everything we talked about with growing pains and the Huxtables and whatever, there's no rules on life insurance, right? It's a name and a percentage. And so many people will put names and percentages for life insurance as they're told to do. And it ends up including their kids who are minors or includes their grandkids who are minors. So avoiding probate, yeah, you could have beneficiaries all over the place. But my nightmare isn't probate, guys. My nightmare, my worst case scenario is not dying and my wife dying and going through probate. My worst case scenario is my wife dying and I dying and my kids getting all the money with no rules. Because at 18 years old, they're not going to make the best life decisions and they're the most important thing to me. Okay. So yes, I could avoid probate with beneficiaries. And if you tell me I'm going to die and my wife is still going to be alive, yes, I'm all for leaving my wife everything as beneficiary or joint owner. A wonderful way to avoid probate. But because it's possible bad things happen to her, or bad things happen to her after bad things happen to me, which is more likely to happen, I got to make sure that we don't have our kids getting money at the wrong time. So if there was only a way to avoid probate in a way where we still have rules, right? Well, that's where we get down to revocable trusts. One more point though, I'm sorry. So a lot of my friends, they're similar age, their kids are of similar age. And they say, well, all right, I have life insurance. My wife's my beneficiary. What am I supposed to do as a backup? I tell them have a really good will. That's a low cost option. Have a really good will. Have all those rules as to what happens if your wife predeceased, you're holding things in trust for kids. And then you go back to your life insurance company and you say, hey, I need to change my beneficiaries. My first beneficiary will still be my wife. Well, my second beneficiary, name it the estate of Dave Kubikian or whatever their name is, right? So that way, if bad things happen, that life insurance goes to the place where the rules are. The rules based on what we've done so far would be in the will. So point everything to that will, so at least our money is governed by those rules. To the car wash, right? Okay. A better option as we go, right? I'm starting to spend your money a little more, but what happens with spending money tends to be better options, all things considered, is a revocable trust. A revocable trust. We're going to use these words revocable, irrevocable. I'm going to explain what they mean in a couple slides here. But let's just go through what a trust is. So when we were talking about those family trees, we were talking about testamentary trusts. It's a form of trust. It's contained in your last will and testament. Thus, it's called a testamentary trust. And it can have really great rules, holding money here, giving money there, whatever. The problem with testamentary trusts are those words are in a document, in a will, that doesn't mean anything unless you go through probate. So a testamentary trust gets the job done. It gets the car washed, while we would have to go through probate and deal with delay and costs. Okay. There's also inter vivos trusts, during life, inter vivos trusts. And they take two main forms, revocable and irrevocable. And within those two main things, there's lots of different kinds of revocable or irrevocable. Okay. In general, inter vivos trusts are like creating a box, and your trust and the rules of the trust, what goes in, what goes out, how does it go in, how does it go out of your trust, who gets money from your trust while you're alive, who gets money from your trust when you're dead, right? Those rules will dictate what kind of trust you have. With a revocable trust, the idea is we're putting things in, right, to your trust, things that would be going through probate, or things where we want rules on money. So we'll put your house into a trust. We'll maybe put life insurance or investments into the trust, or we will name the trust as the beneficiary of those financial assets you have. And what ends up happening is that when you die, your trust survives you a little bit because it wasn't you, it was a separate entity. Now, typically when people do revocable trusts, they are the creator of the trust, they're the trustee of the trust, who's the authorized signatory for the trust. During their lives, they're the income beneficiary of the trust. So if we put money in there and that money is making money, we put a rental property in there and that's generating income, that still goes to you because that's what the trust says. Upon your death, there's no probate. And we don't need to go into your will for the rules for the car wash because it's already in your trust. Your trust will say at some point, upon the death of you, after paying some final bills or what have you, everything goes as follows. And that as follows, those rules are the car wash, same as it was with the will. Okay. So you essentially pay several $1,000s now and create an estate plan, all the other documents included, where the plan is to avoid probate and at least on the back end save some money, even if at the front end we spend some money. Revocable trusts are great for people who have business interests, people who have complicated family trees, people who have real estate and they really want to avoid probate, but they're maybe a little too young for the other trusts we're going to talk about. Revocable trusts are great for fact patterns where I have a second spouse and kids from my first spouse. I love them all very dearly. I want to provide for my spouse, my current spouse, as well as provide for my kids. I can't just leave everything to my second spouse because she may not feel the same way about my kids. And if she survives me, there's no guarantee she'll leave her money to my kids. So it's a great way to make sure I'm taking care of everyone. Revocable trusts are wonderful. I'm only down on them because I think a different trust is more wonderful. That's all. Okay. So what's our to-do list here? Avoid probate, check. Accumulate assets, that's self-explanatory. Let's start the plan for long-term care needs. Okay. Any questions thus far on basic estate planning stuff, even though we got into it quite a bit? All right. Hopefully you're still with me. So the next step is to look at the future, right? We're no spring chickens. We're only going to get older every day. That's the plan. And it beats the alternative, which is not getting older anymore. So what do? Well, the vast majority of us will need something called long-term care. Long-term care is one of those things where I define it by what it is not. If long-term care is on this side, healthcare is on that side. Long-term care is not healthcare. I think it's easy for me to remember it that way. Healthcare is doing things that help you get better, helps with your health, right? You go to the doctor to get a checkup, that's healthcare. You go to the hospital because you're not feeling good, well, they get you better, that's healthcare. You broke your leg, healthcare, 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 right? Medicare is healthcare, CDPHP is healthcare, MVP is healthcare, okay? Long-term care is when we're not getting better anymore, right? Mom, she's got a bad hip now. Well, that's long-term care, right? That hip's not going to turn any younger, and that's the deal, right? Dad's got dementia and he's losing it. It's not coming back, right? Not yet, at least, right? Hopefully there are cures for these things. because it doesn't go away, and because it tends to happen in the last third of our lives, the last quarter of our lives, it ends up happening at a time where we don't have income, right? We have retirement, we have Social Security, we have distributions from our retirement, maybe a pension. But we all of a sudden have this new expense when we're on a fixed budget. And so the impact of long-term care is particularly brutal. There are three main ways to pay for long-term care. You're looking at it right on the slide: private pay, long-term care insurance, and the Medicaid program, a specific part of the Medicaid program. Every now and then people will make a look and say, wait a minute, what about Medicare? One of my neighbors, right? They fell, they went to the hospital, and they went to rehab, they got better, they came home, end of story. Medicare covered the whole thing. You don't know what you're talking about. I once had someone basically say that to me at a seminar with like 25 people in it. And I had to kind of school them on how I did know what I was talking about. But yes, that is absolutely possible. And I've seen that happen. And I hope it happens to everyone, where healthcare takes care of you. Okay. That happens in a specific situation, which we're going to talk about. In terms of Medicare, the only thing you're going to hear from me is there's 4 parts to it that cover a bunch of different things. You should be in tune with your Medicare plan. Make sure you're utilizing it. There's lots of plans within it. And I have a fantastic Medicare advisor if you need to talk to someone about it. It's a yearly thing you should consider, and it's at no cost the way Medicare works. But anyway, Medicare is not long-term care. It can provide short-term long-term care in the right fact pattern. And the right fact pattern is where you, mom, dad, spouse, whatever, if you end up going to a hospital, you broke your hip, you broke your leg, you're off your feet for a week, they put a pin somewhere, I don't know. Where do you go from the hospital? You're going to go to rehab. And if you're unable to be at home and then go to rehab, you might be in a nursing facility with rehab. If you were in the hospital admitted for 3 days, Medicare will cover up to the first 20 days in the nursing home in full, and they'll cover up to the next 80 days, day 21 through 100, at about an 80% clip, with a copay on your end that would be about $5,400 or so. It might be $5,100. Over $5,000 a month of copay, but a pretty good deal because nursing homes are super expensive. Wonderful. What's wrong? Well, I'm careful with my words. I suggest you guys should be as well. I said Medicare can cover up to the first 20 days. They can cover up to the next 80 days. And that's because at any point, Medicare could say, hey, you know what? We're looking at these charts. It doesn't look like mom's getting any better. She kind of plateaued in her recovery. She's in the world of long-term care now. She's not getting better. This is not healthcare anymore. This is long-term care. We're out. Or what happens a lot is that sometimes, people refuse care. They don't know what's going on. They're around strangers. They don't want to do anything. They're tired. Medicare, again, can say, we're not covering you anymore. Treatment is being denied. Treatment is being refused. Thus, you're out. Or even worse, people hear Medicare, 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 and they don't realize they were not admitted for 3 days at that hospital. They were admitted for a day and a half, but they were observation the rest of the time. So if nothing else, keep in mind, 3-day admitted can trigger Medicare benefits, short-term care, Medicaid, short-term care, long-term benefits. Short-term, long-term care benefits, excuse me. All right. So obviously we'll take what we can get, but we cannot depend on Medicare as a source for long-term care coverage. Private paying is an expensive endeavor. I'm being kind here when I say to be prepared to pay at least $12,000 a month. It's a lot higher. We're seeing $450 plus a day. We've seen upwards of $500 a day, which is $15,000 a month. The average stay in a nursing home, if you need a nursing home, is about 30 months. Okay, about 30 months. That doesn't mean everyone needs a nursing home for 2.5 years. That's crazy, right? Most people don't need a nursing home. They don't, right? The vast majority of people will not need a nursing home because either they were they didn't, they died before they needed it, or their health was pretty darn good, or they were able to get their care at home, which is the preferred option for most people. Okay. But average stay in a nursing home, if you do need one, that's 30 months. You're looking at, in my example, $360,000. Bye-bye. Despite it being that expensive, we do have clients who private pay. Sometimes they private pay just to get to the point where their assets are protected, and we'll talk about what that means. Other times their prognosis isn't very good, so their best option is to bite the bullet and private pay for some period of time. Okay. Long-term care insurance, that's an option. That's a very good option if you have it. There's a bunch of different long-term care insurance plans and lots of details within those plans that are incredibly important. For example, how much money per day does your long-term care insurance pay? I've had people who say to me, I don't need to do any planning because I have long-term care insurance. I say, that's wonderful. What's your daily benefit? They say, it's $150 a day. Oh, okay. Well, that's good for assisted livings and good for, $4,500 a month of coverage. But if my nursing home is $14,500 a month, I'm short 10 grand every month, right? So you got to know your coverage. I'm not pro or anti long-term care. I'm pro knowing what you got and updating it if you need to. My parents have long-term care insurance. I'm proud that they do. Their son's an elder law attorney that does Medicaid trust that we're about to talk about, and they have long-term care insurance and they've kept it. I think it's wonderful. It's their money and they're doing it all for my brother and I to save a boatload of money. There's other ways to do it, as we'll talk about with trusts, but I'm happy that they have something in place. They happen to have a New York State partnership plan, and that's why they haven't gotten rid of it, because it's kind of like a creme de la creme and something that's increasingly less affordable or available. But they got in early. If they never need a lick of long-term care in their lives, however, you know the deal. They've paid all the premiums and they haven't gotten anything out of it. That's a good thing, right? We pay car insurance. We hope we never need to use it. It's a form of insurance. It's a way to insure against long-term care. There are other ways to do it as well. And that's what we're going to talk about now. So the Medicaid program. Now we hear Medicaid, and first of all, Medicaid is a huge program. It's everything from being the largest insurer when babies are born, what I hear, to being health care for those who don't have a lot of money, to a really fantastic home care and nursing home long-term care program. And it's that latter part that we're going to focus on right now. It's a federal program operated state by state, enforced county by county in New York State. It's a means-tested program, meaning that you don't just qualify because you have a need physically or mentally. You qualify because you qualify financially. And the Medicaid program says you have every right to qualify for this plan. You just need to plan to qualify before this look-back period exists. Currently, there's a 5-year look-back period for nursing home benefits from Medicaid. There's a 2.5-year look-back period for home care, which was supposed to be enforced as of October 1st of 2020, but because of COVID, they extended the enforcement date of this home care look-back period to April 1st coming up. There's talk it may even be extended to July. Stay tuned. But what that means technically right now is if there was a home care need, even if you were a gazillionaire, we could move money into trusts and do this and do that and get anyone qualified for home care. We can get Bill Gates qualified for home care if we needed to, technically. And we could still do that. I can get anyone on this Zoom qualified for February 1st because there's no look back period. What I do today in the next 9 days wouldn't matter towards qualifying on February 1st. At least for now, that's how the rules are. In terms of nursing home, though, I like to give you some bad news because this is the most punitive part of the Medicaid program. These are hot off the presses, the 2021 resource and income levels if you want nursing home Medicaid. And before you close this Zoom because you're disgusted, you can't believe you just wasted an hour, and then you see all these awful numbers. For a single individual, dad's living alone, he's a widower, he needs nursing home because you're tired of taking care of him. He's allowed to have just under $16,000 of resources. His income, the amount of money he gets to keep per month while he's in a nursing home. It's not a typo, $50. That's what he gets to keep. Sometimes dad has mom, and mom is doing all right, dad's not doing all right. Mom's resources could be a lot higher, close to $75,000. Her income could be higher, up to $32.59. In fact, she could have even more income than that. And if mom's got $800 a month of income, we could even move over from dad to mom, enough income to get her up to that $3,200 level, right? Devil's in the details. I'm not getting too nitty gritty on this. We're already pretty into the hour. The important thing to know about nursing home Medicaid and more home care Medicaid is that there's a look back period. It's 5 years for nursing home Medicaid. And this concept, super important, guys. When we apply for Medicaid, they look to see what your resources are. And when they determine whether something or not is your resource, they look to see whether you can touch your money by yourself. If one signature from you puts money in your pocket, that thing is a resource of yours. They step in your shoes. If you can get it, they're going to hold it against you. Now, they're not going to take your money. Medicaid does not take your money. They do something more devious. They say you don't qualify, which means you're paying your own way. You're going to private pay. Okay? They step in your shoes. They want to know what you can touch. So what are resources? Bank accounts, CDs, savings bonds, cash. Of course, those are resources. If they're in your name, you can access them, right? With just your signature. Your stocks, your brokerage accounts, same idea. You could say buy, 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 sell, sell, sell. That's yours. It's a resource of yours. Life insurance with a cash value, because that has value today. It's got a cash value you can grab with just your signature. Real estate. Dad could sell me his house right now if I had the right amount of money in my pocket. That's a resource of his. You need a nursing home, Dad? You know what? Why don't you sell your house and pay your way, and then we'll figure it out. That's what Medicaid would say. Retirement. Sometimes retirement is considered a resource. It's actually quite good news. It's limited to Roth IRAs, which would be considered a resource absent some planning. But your 401ks, your regular IRAs, your 403bs, your pensions, those are not resources. They're income, right? Medicaid is going to look at the distributions, the required minimum distributions you're supposed to take when you are applying for Medicaid. They want your income. And as we said before, if you're stuck with keeping only $50 a month of income because you're in a nursing home, well, every dollar of income from your retirement, they're going to suck up. Still, it's a really, really good rule, in my opinion, because the distributions you're going to take from that retirement are relatively low percentages, and based on the market and what's going on in the economy, you might even outperform the distribution you're supposed to take. Meaning, I have $1 million IRA, let's say, I need to take 3% of it as a distribution because that's what Medicaid tells me. Well, 3% of $1 million is 30 grand. That means Medicaid is going to get 30 grand. Now that nursing home, right, that may have cost me 180 grand, 15,000 times 12 months, but I'm giving them 30 plus my Social Security. I'm still getting quite the deal, okay? But more importantly, that retirement's got a beneficiary, and that retirement grew 3% or 4% in that same year. So I may end up a year later with more money in my retirement and have my nursing home paid for, right? Obviously, I did take a distribution and give it, but it could be worse, okay? Lastly, jointly held assets. People think all the time, well, I added my daughter to my bank account to avoid probate. Can they take all my bank account money? Well, chances are your daughter didn't put anything into it, right? So the presumption is it's all yours unless we can rebut the presumption by showing someone else put money into an account. All right. Moving along, let's talk about this 5-year look back period because it confuses people, and similar applies to the 2.5-year look back period once that's in place. So the 5-year look back period, when does it count? What's going on? Well, we only care about the look back period if you need a nursing home, because when we apply for a nursing home, we need to provide the last 5 years of finances, everything, every monthly statement, every quarterly statement for the brokerage accounts. We need to account to Medicaid exactly what you had, what you have, and how you got from what you had to what you have. Did you gift money? Did you spend like a sailor? Did you go on a cruise around the world? Believe it or not, they care about the cruise. They don't care about the cruises. They don't care about spending like a sailor. They only care about when you gave money away. There's a series of things that are considered exempt transfers. Paying for things, getting your money's worth on things is exempt. Giving money outright to a spouse is considered exempt, subject to the spouse's rules for resources. And then they throw this little thing here that you could exempt transfers made for non-Medicaid planning reasons. Tempting, really hard to prove, because chances are that when those transfers were made by mom and dad, even if they were feeling pretty good and nowhere near a nursing home, they probably were taking medications that were indicative of old age and getting older and possibilities of nursing homes. And Medicaid likes to contest whether or not a transfer was truly for non-medical reasons or not. But they look backwards 5 years, 60 months. Let's say that they find that over the 60 months, there was about 100 grand of gifts. Now you're thinking, who in their right mind is gifting $100,000 of gifts? I don't believe it. Well, it happens, right? Sometimes we're helping our kids with their mortgage, or we say, you know, I want to see my kids enjoy the money I had. I don't want them to just get it when I'm dead. I want to see it with my own eyes. Here's some money for to help the kids with school. Here's some money here or there. Here's money to a great charity, because I want to see them benefit from the money I'm given. Well, I use 100 grand because the numbers end up being pretty easy. What Medicaid does with this fact pattern is they don't say you don't qualify for the program. You still may be approved, but it will be subject to a penalty period. And they calculate the penalty period by taking that 100 grand in my example and say, well, you're in the upstate region where there's a regional rate of whatever, 11 grand. They take the 100, they divide by the 11 grand, they come up with a product of 9, which is the length of your penalty, 9 months. Okay, this may not mean anything yet. It's about to mean something, because the penalty will start to run when you are at or below 15,900, when you're living in a nursing facility and your application, except for the penalty period, is otherwise approved. And that's when the penalty starts to run, which means that for the next 9 months, I'm in a nursing home paying my own way, which might be 14 grand, 15 grand a month. So that's what, $135,000 I will pay over the next 9 months, when I have only 15,000 in my name, all because 4 years ago I gave away 100,000. This doesn't equate. It's a punitive, brutal penalty. Why am I telling you about this awful thing? Well, we, in a worst case scenario, will use this penalty against Medicaid to protect up to, and sometimes more than, half your money in a worst case scenario. It's called a crisis plan, and this is kind of how it works. And I realize I don't really have to do this, probably confuses people, but one of the lessons I want you to know is you don't have to plan 5 years ahead of time to save money. You need to plan 5 years ahead of time to save the most money, but even 5 days ahead of time, there's things we can do to protect half of your money. And so if you have loved ones, if you're dealing with a current situation, if tomorrow you start dealing with a situation, say, my goodness, I wish we had planned 5 years ago. We didn't. That's such a shame. There's still something we can do. And this is roughly how it works. And if we get this together, then I really feel like I accomplished something today as we move on. So how do we do it? The idea is that someone comes into my office and they say, hi, mom fell, she's in a hospital, then went to a nursing home for rehab, and the nursing home is saying that she's not going to be able to go home, and we agree the house is just not compatible. We never did a lick of planning. She's got $150,000 of assets. What do we do? Well, what we will do is we'll take a look at the lay of the land. We'll say, all right, well, you got 150. Okay. You're allowed 15. So that means you have 135 too much, 135,000 more than you're allowed to have. 15 plus 135 is 150. And we'll say, all right, well, let's look around. What could we use money for validly to spend down? Have we prepaid funeral for mom? No, we haven't. Okay, here's 10 grand for funeral arrangements. Okay, so now we don't have 135 too much, we have 125 too much. Okay, Say, all right, well, maybe we could, well, certainly you'd hire someone like me or another firm, right, to do it. That'll cost some money. Maybe we find some odds and ends here and there to fix something in the house, or mom needs this and that, some new things for her nursing home. Maybe we get down to 120 in terms of what we have extra, or 125 or 110 or whatever. Let's say 120. Keep numbers easy. We still have $120,000. If we do nothing, we're going to spend that money every month for the nursing home. So instead, what we do is we divide that number in half. We take about 60 grand and we give it to your kids. And you're going to say, well, that was stupid. I went to your webinar and you said how a $100,000 gift results in a 9-month penalty period. You're saying a $60,000 gift, geez, it's going to be a 5 or 6 month penalty. Yeah, good math. You're very right. So we're going to give away 60 grand and we're going to say, hey, Medicaid, look at this. Here's 60 grand we just gave away. With the other 60 grand we had 120, we gave away 60. With the other 60, we're going to loan it. A loan to your kids, a promissory note where the kids say, I promise to pay back 60 grand plus interest. How long is that loan for? It's a loan for 6 months. Okay, 6 installment payments on that loan. What are we doing here, guys? We had 150. We're allowed to keep 15. We prepay funeral. We give the attorney some money. We pay some odds and ends. We got 120 left. We don't want to spend 120. So the attorney says, give 60 here, loan 60 there. We'll apply for Medicaid after we do that, and Medicaid will approve the application, subject to the penalty. Medicaid will calculate the penalty, 60 grand divided by the rate that they apply, 6-month penalty. With the loan, they don't have a problem with it. Why? Because mom, even in her old age, was an incredible businesswoman. She's earning interest on her money. She's making 60 grand profitable and unavailable to her. Because if Medicaid steps in her shoes, they can't get that 60 grand from me, that loan. Best they could do is receive my loan payments every month. It's unavailable, and it wasn't a gift. So they will approve her because she is below the resource level. We only have 15,000 left. She is in the nursing home, and we are approved subject to the penalty. All right, smart guy. So how do we deal with life? How are we going to pay for this? Okay. Month 1, we got to come up with 14 grand for the nursing home. How do we do it? Well, I'm going to repay from the loan $10,000 plus interest, plus her Social Security, plus her distribution from retirement or what have you, 14 grand, boom. Month 2, same thing, 3, 4, 5, 6, same thing. In month 7, or more likely sometime in month 6, there's no more penalty. I've served my time. I've used all the loan money to make up for the fact that there was a penalty. I'm in the nursing home. My Medicaid application was always approved, so Medicaid starts paying. Well, what did we accomplish? Well, we snapshot month 7, mom's got 15 grand in the bank, and she gave away $60,000. That still is in the hands of her kids. So she started with 150. She ended with 75,000 plus a prepaid funeral, right? So worst case, we saved half the money. Now, people say, well, why don't you gift all the money? Well, because there's a longer penalty period and there's no loan there. What if we loan all the money? That sounded great. Well, that doesn't do anything because every month she's getting a loan payment that she'll have to use for the nursing home because they want her income. So the only way it works is roughly half, and it's far more complicated than what I just said. But the reason why I wanted to go through it, even though I can't even see your faces, is because it's such an important concept to understand, right? Saving 50 cents of every dollar is wonderful. It requires a lot of work, and it's a great last second thing. But I contend that I would much rather prefer to save all 100 cents of the dollars. Because even if we do miracles and save 60 grand or 75 grand, by definition, that means we did not save the other 75 grand. Okay.
Mhm.
All you got to do is prepare ahead of time a little bit, which gets us to this other trust. Okay. So this is called a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust. Sometimes we call it an irrevocable Medicaid trust. Okay. And this is where people tighten up. People don't like to talk about things that are irrevocable because they think of the word irrevocable and they think of irrevocable, lowercase I, irrevocable, what it means to us day to day, right? But irrevocable does not mean what you think it means. When I do seminars in person, and hopefully later this year we get to do those again, we'll see. I ask people, what does the word irrevocable mean? And I get 3 answers every time, right? What do they say? You can't change it. You can't undo it. You can't control it. That's what they say to me. Wrong, wrong, wrong. That is not what irrevocable means. Okay. And this is also where people start throwing tomatoes at me when I'm doing this. Irrevocable means, ready? Irrevocable means not revocable. That's it. Well, what does revocable mean? Revocable means you, the creator of something, can undo that something by yourself with just your signature. That's what revocable means. That's literally what it means. Okay? You by yourself can undo it. Revocable doesn't work when it comes to Medicaid, right? It doesn't work because if you by yourself can turn something into money, well, when Medicaid steps in your shoes, they too could turn something into money. Thus, it's a resource of yours. They say, go use your resources and talk to us when you don't have any resources left. Okay. So with a revocable trust, avoid probate, great, but we have way too much by ourselves control. Our signature is too powerful. So my predecessors, attorneys that have come and gone in New York State, came up with this great idea, which is a trust that's geared specifically towards protecting assets from Medicaid's reach. If Medicaid cares when you by yourself can do something, well, we just create something where you by yourself cannot remove all the money from the trust. That's different than I can't get money out of the trust, or I can't change the trust, or I can't undo the trust. You could do all those things. In fact, you could change it by yourself whenever you feel like it. But when we're pulling money out, it's possible. It's just not something you do by yourself. That's what makes it not revocable or irrevocable. Now, people hear that other word, irrevocable, and they kind of freak out. Interesting thing about the Medicaid trust. This is my favorite little tidbit. There's one word that is not in your Medicaid trust. I've checked. I've done a little word search. Do you know what word is not in your Medicaid trust? The word Medicaid is not in the Medicaid trust. I think it's the most fascinating thing in the world. And it makes perfect sense because this is not a Medicaid trust because we called it one. We refer to it as a Medicaid trust because if, there's other kinds of irrevocable trusts out there that are far more irrevocable. It's called a Medicaid trust because it's got just a little bit of irrevocability just so that Medicaid's off our tail. Okay. The rules of the trust dictate that it's going to help qualify us for Medicaid. But there's lots of good things that come with the fact that this is just barely irrevocable. So we are the income beneficiary of our trust. We are getting the star exemption for our real estate in the trust. We decide what happens to that house. We buy and sell it as we please. We control our investments if we want to. We can change our beneficiaries. We could change our trustees whenever we feel like it. We still control everything. We're the boss. We're the puppeteer, and whoever we name as trustee, who can't be us, because that would be too much power, they dance when we say dance. Because if they don't dance, we fire them. But more importantly, they dance when we say dance because they're our family, because we're doing all this for them anyway. We're doing it to save them money, so there's more money when I die, right? That's the whole point.
Mm.
So we put things in like real estate because at a minimum, we want to avoid probate. I hope you never need a nursing home, but I want you to avoid probate, and the trust will pay for itself just by that fact that we avoid probate. But we keep going. We put some finances in. We put the things that Medicaid will look at. Not every dollar we own. That would be silly. A lot of dollars we own, knowing we could always pull it out. The mechanism to pull it out is not my own signature. It's me plus my trustee, right? Or me plus my trustee and my beneficiary, if that's how it's worded. But guess what? I always control who those people are. They're replaceable. I can fix that, right? So you still control everything. It's just you don't go to the bank yourself to pull your money out like you do now. One little red tape, but it saves 100 cents of every dollar that's in that trust, as long as it's been in there for the 5 years, if it's a 5-year look back period, 2.5 years, if it's that kind of look back period, and so on. Okay. So you can still lowercase revoke the trust. It can be undone. You could still change who gets what, because you always had that power. Okay. You could pull money out because you underestimated how much money you want to have. You always have the option of unprotecting money. Okay. It's a wonderful thing to consider, at least, right? Devil's in the details. Sometimes people just have a house. There's other alternatives we keep in mind for them that are less expensive than the trust. Okay, but that's how it works. It's really quite fascinating, and for all the other purposes, it's as if it's still a revocable trust. We're still using and enjoying everything that's in our trust. We're still choosing our own adventure. Okay. That sounds complicated. It's been an hour and 10 minutes. That's a lot. I'm just going to give things to my kids. They'll take care of me. Don't do that. I'm
I like
somebody's
it.
kid. Don't do it. I'm somebody's kid. I tell my parents, don't do it. Don't you dare. Okay. Bad things happen to kids too. Kids have divorces, and kids decide to buy wave runners with your money, and they say, don't worry, you'll live with me.
Well.
Don't see the inside of a nursing home. It's all good, Mom. We've seen it blow up in flames, but the most important part about this trust, guys, I like avoiding probate. I like protecting assets. What I love more is controlling things. And you're not allowed to give up control under my watch. You have to, look, we're planning for something that may be devastating decades from now for you. So why would we mortgage the present for the future? So we don't do that. So you have to control everything. When you do outright gifts to people like your kids, it's now their money. You can guilt them, you can do everything you want, but you can't force them to give you money. With your trust, you always are able to get your money out if you want to. And that's why I don't like outright transfers to kids. Okay. And if you are pro outright transfer to kids, you may adopt me whenever you feel like it, and then you can give me money that way. Okay. Lastly, or second to lastly, community Medicaid. We have whole webinars that are about Medicaid. In fact, I think Monday and Wednesday this past week, we talked about aging in place and elder law basics. Those should be available on our website if you want to take a peek. Usually we're talking about some version of it every week on Wednesdays. Really super important program. A lot of times we have people who come to us late in the game, but they don't need a nursing home yet. And the idea of a 5-year look back period seems pretty brutal. They don't know if they're going to get through 5 years. Community Medicaid makes it a little more doable because they can get care at home while they're accruing towards the 5 years. We don't need perfect health anymore. We just need to not have nursing home health. Okay. We could save income during it. It's a whole other thing. I'm not going to talk about it that much. second to last or last now, we do Medicaid applications. I think we do a lot of things really well. I think this is what we do the best. There are so many little nooks and crannies and details that we like to take advantage of and help in getting people qualified. We've done hearings against Medicaid and been victorious. We I think are very creative in the ways we get people qualified for the program. And until our team says it's not possible, I believe it is all possible. We do free consults. Don't you dare listen to this and say we need a trust or we need this, we need that. You need to talk more about it. Get your specific fact pattern looked at by a elder law attorney. We have elder law attorneys at Herzog. Other firms have elder law attorneys. It's all right to talk to other people. You need to talk to someone who's proficient in this area. We have a radio program. Feel free to listen to it. Don't rely on it's not gospel, right? Facts still matter. Your facts matter, but feel free to listen to our radio program as well. I thank you all for joining. I'm going to stop recording this in a moment. And remember, we will send slides out to everyone, and this recording will be available to you all. So I'm just going to press stop record. And then if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to